Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli. A few days ago, I was having a conversation with my friend, and he told me, look, Fahim, I am maintaining a current bank account. I have never taken a loan from a bank, and if need be, I would opt for the Islamic banking route, right? So what's this fuss about interest? Because I am abstaining myself from interest, so why should I be worried about it, right? So I think it's important to address this question at the outset before we move forward. There are three main justifications or points as to why every one of us should be worried about interest and should do something about it. So positive impact on society, that includes you, me, and all of us, would be felt only when the economic structure is built without interest as an ingredient. So it would not help if few people are abstaining from interest, but the whole economic model is built on interest. The just economic system cannot be built, shared economic prosperity cannot be achieved. So it has to be in its entirety, number one. Number two, from Pakistan's perspective, around 60% of our tax is going towards the payment of interest. So whether you like it or not, or willingly or unwillingly, I mean, you are party to pay the interest, right? So that should be a matter of concern. Number three, talked about the Islamic banking, but we are aware that the returns in Islamic banking are also based on the conventional model. I mean, what I mean by that is that it is based on the KIBOR, Karachi Interbank Offered Rate. So it's based on that. So it's not obviously entirely free from interest from that perspective, and we have accepted it as a given that within that environment we will build the Islamic banking sector, right? So I mean, from my perspective, these two cannot run in parallel. So that's the third reason why we should strive for an economy which is free from interest. To understand this, we need to have a look at this graph where the orange line reflects the growth rate of the quantity of money in our economy for the last 20 years or so, and the gray one is reflecting the growth in our GDP, the goods and services that we produce. And we can clearly see that the growth of money is outpacing the growth in our GDP. What does it mean? It means that fewer goods are being chased by a large sum of money. What would be the implication? Erosion of value of money, which we call inflation. So there is kind of a systematic inflation, and that is being reflected as the gray bars in the chart, the difference between the growth in the quantity of money and the growth in GDP. So this is the systematic inflation being built into the system, and that provides a justification for an interest in an economy. Now, before moving on to establish certain principles for having an interest-free economy, it is very important to understand what I call a macroeconomic vicious circle for us, right? It starts from the fact that the government earns less and has to spend more, which we call fiscal deficit. How to cover it? Either it prints money or it borrows from public. As already mentioned, when it prints more money, it gives rise to inflation and hence becomes a reason for charging interest. When it borrows from public through banks by issuing treasury notes, it is in fact setting a base price for a piece of paper, right? So when it has set a base price for a piece of paper, so obviously there will be an interest in an economy for the rest to charge as well. And when this happens, when this base rate is being set, when banks can earn comfortably by lending it to the government, the natural repercussion would be that it would not be that depositors' money would not be invested in the business. It kills the business. And the fourth implication would be when the business will be on the lower side, so our tax collection would be lower as well. And when the tax collection would be lower, it again gives rise to fiscal deficit, and again we print money, and this circle goes on and on. So we have to set the principles, we have to get things right for breaking this vicious circle. Yeah, so there are three things that need to be understood, and these are in relation to money, business, and tax. First we will touch on money. So what exactly is money? To understand it, let's suppose that I have this pen and my friend has this marker, right? So I want to sell this pen, but he only has marker to give it to me, but I don't need it, right? So what should we do? Here the money will come in to play its role as a mediator, as a judge, as a unit of measurement. So this is the role of the money. It's a medium of exchange. It helps in achieving a certain objective, but not an objective in itself. It helps in fueling the economy, but not an economy in itself, right? So what we have done is that we have considered money as an economy itself. And this can be demonstrated from this graph, as you're seeing, that the treasury bills and the Pakistan investment bonds and this money and the transactions, say in this money market, it has increased from, on an annual basis, from 10 trillion to 29 trillion in the span of 5 to 6 years, and currently it is representing 80% of GDP. And also, just to give you another number, the volume of Pakistan Stock Exchange represents 15 to 20% of this whole money market. So this is how we are treating money, this is how we are dealing with money, creating money out of money, setting a price for money, but not putting into use this money. And Imam Hassan al-Basri has a tremendous quote on money, and he says that money is your companion that only gives the benefit when it leaves you, right? So this is the purpose of money, and our first principle for having an interest-free economic system would be that money is to be treated only as a medium of exchange. Now business. What is business? We know that this is something which entails risk. We take risk, we put in the efforts, and we expect a certain return, right? So how come you invest in business and can determine or establish a predetermined rate on that? So say I am giving you $1 million and I would need 15% on an annual basis. How? Why? Where is that 16% or 15% or whatever it is coming from? How can you assess that what kind of result a business can give? So this is against the basic principle, fundamental of business, but somehow it is embedded into our economic system, that where we give a loan for a business but expect a fixed rate of return, or we want to give a fixed rate of return but do not want to share the actual profits in the business, or someone is not willing to bear in case there are losses. So this is very basic, but that concept needs to be changed. We need to understand that if you want to do business, there is a risk that has to be catered for. No risk, no business. So there is no fixed returns in business. So this is the principle number 2, and this is something that would need to be implemented entirely across the economic system. And the third one is tax. So what's the purpose of tax? We are aware that tax is required to run the affairs of the government. But there is one more objective, and that is to help in the flow of wealth, like the zakat does. It helps in the flow of wealth in an economy. So whenever we want to establish certain tax policy, those two objectives need to be considered. And talking about flow of wealth, what is another thing which helps in the flow of wealth? That is business, the entrepreneurial activity which helps in the creation of jobs and the flow of wealth. So what should be our tax policy to meet these two objectives? It should be based on the fact that it incentivizes the business that is already helping in the flow of wealth, and it should discourage hoarding. So if you have large cash piles, or if you are sitting on an idle land, so that has to be taxed at a higher rate. So to ensure that that wealth is flown in the economy, and secondly, lower tax rates for those who are doing genuine business and helping in creating employment. So this would be third. Tax incentivize business, discourages hoarding. Lastly, what kind of mindset we need to have to move forward? We do not need a mindset that quickly separates what is practical and what is not practical. We need to have a mindset that is passionate enough to make practical what is right and stop doing that is practical but wrong.
और इश्क से